Catherine Zeta-Jones is not just a movie star. She is cinematic royalty, a timeless emblem of grace and fire, a woman whose very presence seemed destined to be immortalized on the silver screen. From the very first glance, the world was spellbound by her vintage beauty, her regal poise, and the kind of luminous energy that set every frame she touched ablaze. On screen, she was a force of nature. In Chicago, her portrayal of Velma Kelly didn't just win applause. It etched itself into the memory of an entire generation. Scarlet lips, razor-sharp movements, thunder burning in her eyes. Catherine was unforgettable. Yet beyond the stage lights and the roar of admiration lived a woman very few ever truly knew. A woman who bled in silence, who smiled even as chaos closed in, and who carried wounds that the world never saw but that never truly healed. Behind the glamour, there was always another story. A mother at war with invisible demons. A legend suffocating beneath the very light that once crowned her. What you are about to witness is not just the tale of stardom. It is a haunting journey through pain, love, collapse, and survival. If Catherine Zeta-Jones ever stirred your heart, then let this story be a quiet ovation for her. The woman who never stopped shining, even in the darkest storm. Long before the camera flashes, before the red carpets and the golden statues, Catherine Zeta-Jones's first battle for survival began not in Hollywood, but in a hospital ward. Beneath her chin lies a faint scar, almost invisible beneath decades of makeup and glamour. But that delicate mark carries a story more painful than most of Hollywood will ever know. As a toddler in Swansea, Wales, Catherine was struck by a devastating viral infection. Her tiny lungs began to fail, her breathing shallow and fading. In a desperate attempt to save her life, doctors performed an emergency tracheotomy. Her throat was cut open, and a tube placed inside, allowing her fragile body to take in air once again. That scar became her very first reminder that life itself would never come easily. It would always demand a fight. When the wound finally healed, the scar remained. It learned to hide beneath powder, beneath elegance, beneath the dazzling persona the world would one day adore. But for Catherine, it was never gone. It pulsed quietly, a reminder that survival was written into her very skin. She was born on September 25, 1969, into a working-class family. Her father ran a modest bakery, and her mother stitched clothes with patience and resilience. Their life was simple. Narrow streets, early mornings, hand-me-down clothes. Yet within that quiet world, Catherine seemed to burn brighter than her surroundings. She would dance through the living room as though the walls were wings. She would sing with a voice that didn't ask for permission, but demanded to be heard. Her parents saw it, the spark, the hunger, the unteachable fire, and when destiny knocked, they opened the door wide. In a miraculous twist of fate, the Zeta-Jones family won $100,000 in the national lottery, an unimaginable fortune for their means. But instead of squandering it on comfort, they chose transformation. They bought a pastry shop, moved into a better neighborhood, and most importantly, invested every possible resource into Catherine's future. Dance lessons, stage coaching, voice training. Every sacrifice was made to fan the flame already burning inside their daughter. By the age of 4, Catherine was performing in local church halls. At 11, she commanded the stage in Annie. At 13, she lit up London's West End in Bugsy Malone. While other children were out chasing sunlight and carefree afternoons, Catherine was already trading her childhood for rehearsals, auditions, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. By 14, she stood at a crossroads most adults could not fathom. She auditioned for the national tour of The Pajama Game. Directed by Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees. Not only did she win the role, she stole it. She moved to London, rehearsed like a veteran, and within a year, made the decision that would alter her life forever. At just 15 years old, Catherine left school entirely to pursue acting full-time. No plan B, no safety net. While girls her age were writing secrets in diaries, Catherine was navigating rooms filled with critics, producers, and expectations far larger than her years. Later in life, she would confess, "People think I was fearless, but I was just trying to keep up. There was no plan B." Her scar, her sacrifice, her childhood, none of it was ordinary. She was a child who never truly had the luxury of being a child. Each applause came with a cost. Each ovation carried the weight of responsibility. And behind every dazzling smile was a girl learning far too early that dreams come carved with pain. After trading her school books for scripts at the age of 15, Catherine Zeta-Jones walked straight into the fire. The decision was as bold as it was terrifying: to gamble her entire future on a world that devours even the strongest. While other teenagers were worried about exams, she was navigating casting rooms filled with seasoned adults who often looked at her as if she didn't belong. Yet Catherine refused to shrink. Her scar, her history, her sacrifices, they had already taught her survival. In 1990, she landed her very first film role in the French production 1001 Nights. For Catherine, it was supposed to be the beginning of something magical. She envisioned herself stepping into cinema with all the grace of a rising star. Instead, it was a crushing humiliation. The film was a disaster, grossing less than $254,000 in France and selling under 740 tickets. To the industry, it was a failure. To Catherine, it was a warning. Hollywood would not welcome her with open arms. But Catherine was not built to surrender. She returned to England, where she rebuilt from the ground up. Her chance came in the beloved television series, The Darling Buds of May, 1991-1993. Audiences adored her. Critics praised her. For the first time, she became a household name in the UK. Piece by piece, she was proving that failure in the first act does not define the ending. Yet when she crossed the Atlantic in pursuit of Hollywood glory, she was met with doors that slammed shut almost as quickly as they opened. Casting directors saw only another pretty face with a British accent, a TV star who didn't quite fit the cinematic mold. She accepted roles where she could: Christopher Columbus, The Discovery, 1992, Splitting Heirs, 1993, The Phantom, 1996. Each was meant to be a stepping stone, but instead they became reminders that her dream was slipping further away. Reviews were cold, phone calls grew silent, and Catherine began to question if perhaps the doubters were right. She would later admit, "I started to think maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't have what it took." It is heartbreaking to imagine a woman who had conquered the West End stage, now doubting every word, every glance, every performance. The spotlight that once felt like destiny began to flicker, and then fate intervened. Steven Spielberg saw her. Some say it was her role in Titanic, 1996, the miniseries. Others claim it was in the young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Wherever it was, something about Catherine's presence lingered in his mind. That single spark of belief was all she needed. With Spielberg's interest, doors that had been locked tight began to open. Scripts arrived. Opportunities multiplied. Then, in 1998, came the role that would transform her from overlooked ingenue into international star, Elena Montero, in The Mask of Zorro. But the role was not simply handed to her. She faced fierce competition: Penelope Cruz, Shakira, and others far more familiar to American audiences. Catherine had to fight for it, to train for it, to prove herself worthy in every possible way: sword fighting, horseback riding, dialect coaching. She poured every drop of herself into the performance. When the cameras rolled, she did not merely act, she exploded. Catherine Zeta-Jones was no longer a hopeful dreamer. She was undeniable. She was unstoppable. She was a star. When The Mask of Zorro premiered in 1998, Catherine Zeta-Jones did more than debut in Hollywood. She arrived like a storm. The film became a global phenomenon, earning over $250 million on a $95 million budget, and critics could not look away. One reviewer wrote, "She didn't steal the scene, she owned it." Overnight, Catherine transformed from a British television darling into an international sensation. But her triumph wasn't just about beauty and elegance. Behind every graceful movement on screen lay months of grueling work. She trained relentlessly, bruising ribs, cutting her hands during sword practice, falling off horses, yet she refused a stunt double. Every slash of the blade, every fiery spin, was Catherine herself. "I wanted to earn it," she said later. "Not just be pretty in a dress, but hold my own next to Antonio Banderas." She didn't just hold her own, she commanded the screen. Hollywood took notice. In 1999, she starred opposite Sean Connery in Entrapment, a film that became iconic for a single, unforgettable scene. Catherine weaving gracefully between red laser beams, her movements as hypnotic as they were dangerous. The image turned her into an emblem of allure and sophistication, cementing her status as one of the most captivating actresses of her generation. The roles that followed revealed a depth few expected. In Traffic 2000, she shed glamour entirely to play the conflicted wife of a drug lord. The performance was raw, real, and haunting, earning her both a SAG Award and a Golden Globe nomination. Catherine proved she was not just a star to be admired, she was an actress to be revered. But it was in 2002 that she reached the summit. Cast as Velma Kelly in Chicago, Catherine gave the performance of a lifetime. Pregnant with her daughter Karis, she sang, danced, and burned with a ferocity that turned every scene into lightning. The film swept the Academy Awards, and Catherine herself walked away with the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress just 10 days before giving birth. "I carried more than a child that night," she once said. "I carried every rejection, every doubt, every scar, and I let them all go." That moment, an Oscar in her hand, a child in her womb, was the perfect portrait of Catherine's power. Strength, beauty, and resilience all fused into one unforgettable image. In those years, Catherine Zeta-Jones wasn't just Hollywood's favorite new star, she was a symbol of timeless glamour, of artistry, of a woman who had conquered every doubt to stand at the very peak of her craft. At the height of her glory, when the world imagined Catherine Zeta-Jones living a life of endless red carpets and applause, a quieter, darker story was unfolding behind the scenes. What looked like perfection from afar often felt like suffocation up close. After the birth of her daughter Karis in 2003, Catherine and her husband Michael Douglas made the bold decision to retreat from Hollywood's spotlight, moving to Bermuda to raise their children away from flashing cameras. To outsiders, it looked idyllic. Blue skies, ocean breezes, a family building paradise. But within the stillness, shadows gathered. Catherine began to experience severe mood swings, crippling exhaustion, and waves of despair that no amount of sunshine could cure. She smiled for cameras. She posed for magazines, but inside she felt herself unraveling. Later, she confessed, "I had to smile at premieres while I was falling apart inside." The eventual diagnosis came like thunder: bipolar II disorder, a condition marked by severe depression and emotional turbulence. At first, she hid it, fearing judgment, gossip, and pity. For years, she carried the weight alone. The storms outside her own mind only deepened the struggle. In 2009, Michael's eldest son, Cameron, was arrested and later sentenced to prison for drug charges, a scandal that tore at the family. Then, in 2010, Catherine was dealt another devastating blow. Michael himself was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. She walked hospital corridors at his side, holding his hand as he endured brutal rounds of chemotherapy. The man who had once been her rock, her protector, now lay frail and silent under thin hospital blankets. Catherine kept vigil at his bedside, her own spirit buckling beneath the strain. And then came the humiliation that cut even deeper. During a candid interview, Michael linked his cancer to HPV, a sexually transmitted virus. The comment, quickly sensationalized, dragged Catherine into the headlines in a way she had never invited. What should have been a private fight for survival turned into a circus of speculation. The whispers were cruel. The judgment was sharp. Friends said Catherine felt betrayed and exposed, as if the last shred of her privacy had been stripped away. Already fragile, she broke. By 2011, the weight was unbearable. Catherine quietly admitted herself into a mental health facility in Connecticut. When the news leaked, she made a courageous choice. Instead of hiding, she stood up. "This is a disorder that affects millions of people. I'm not ashamed. Mental health is not something to hide." With those words, Catherine shattered decades of silence around mental illness in Hollywood. But while her honesty inspired millions, her marriage began to fracture. By 2013, she and Michael announced a separation. The press feasted on rumors, infidelity, betrayal, collapse. The truth was quieter, but far more painful. Two people, both broken in different ways, drifting apart after years of storms. Alone in her mid-40s, Catherine was forced to face her deepest fears of losing her marriage, her family, her sense of self. The applause had faded. The spotlight had turned harsh. And in the silence of night, she found herself asking whether the woman who had once conquered Hollywood could survive her own life. When Catherine Zeta-Jones checked into treatment in 2011, she did it quietly, with no grand announcement, no performance for the cameras. Yet when the story broke, she made a decision that would change not only her life, but also the lives of millions who silently carried the same battles. "I'm not ashamed," she declared. "Mental health is not something to hide." With those few words, Catherine transformed private pain into public courage. Letters poured in from fans who thanked her for speaking aloud what they had never dared to admit, that it was possible to hurt deeply and still rise again. She had once been a symbol of beauty and elegance. Now she became something even more powerful, a symbol of resilience. Still, recovery was not a straight line. In 2013, she and Michael Douglas announced they were separating. Headlines screamed of betrayal and collapse, but the truth was quieter, more human. "We needed space to heal," Catherine explained. For nearly a year, they lived apart. Two wounded souls trying to remember who they were without the other. The world waited for a scandal. Instead, what came was something far rarer: reconciliation. Quietly, privately, Catherine and Michael chose each other again. No cameras, no press releases, just two hands finding each other in the dark, still believing in love. Her return was not just personal, it was professional. Catherine began speaking openly about her mental health journey, insisting that the world treat it with the same respect given to cancer or heart disease. "We talk about those illnesses openly," she said. "Why not mental illness?" Her honesty cracked the silence in Hollywood, making space for others to tell their truths. And slowly she found her way back to the stage and screen. In every interview, her eyes carried both shadows and fire. She had not erased the pain, she had absorbed it, reshaped it, and used it as fuel. No longer the ingenue desperate to prove herself, she now carried the strength of a woman who had fallen apart and learned how to rise. Her resurrection was not marked by a single triumphant moment, but by something far braver: endurance. Choosing day after day to live, to fight, and to keep moving forward. Catherine had once conquered Hollywood with her beauty. Now she was conquering life itself with her resilience. By the time Catherine Zeta-Jones entered her 50s, the storms she had weathered had not dimmed her light. They had refined it. No longer chasing the feverish pace of Hollywood, she embraced a quieter kind of power, one built on peace, presence, and purpose. She divided her time between a $33 million villa in Mallorca, Spain, surrounded by olive trees and timeless stone walls, and a Manhattan apartment overlooking Central Park. The Spanish estate was more than property. It was sanctuary. "A beautiful home is only beautiful if it holds peace," she once said, and for Catherine, peace had become her truest luxury. Her career did not vanish, it evolved. In 2022, she stunned audiences as Morticia Addams in Netflix Wednesday, proving that reinvention was her greatest art. She was not everywhere, not in every film, but when she appeared, the world paused. Presence, not ubiquity, had become her hallmark. Beyond acting, she built a second empire, her lifestyle brand, Casa Zeta-Jones. Home decor, luxury bedding, cosmetics, fashion, each product reflected her eye for timeless beauty. Endorsements and partnerships added millions to her wealth, but money was never the measure. Legacy, not numbers, was what mattered. For her contributions to drama, she was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 2010, an honor she described as humbling. Yet her truest honor came not from titles, but from her family. Dylan and Karis, now grown, had become her pride, her continuation. In photographs, her daughter's resemblance to her is striking, like Catherine looking into a mirror of time. Still, her shadow never fully disappeared. Bipolar II disorder remained a part of her life, a quiet reminder of the battles she still carried. But unlike before, she no longer hid. She managed it with meditation, yoga, and discipline, turning what was once shame into strength. "It doesn't go away," she admitted, "but you learn to live with it." Perhaps Catherine's greatest legacy is not the Oscar on her shelf, or the headlines she once dominated, but the courage she gave to others. By speaking openly about pain, she showed the world that scars, both visible and invisible, are not signs of weakness, but proof of survival. From a little girl in Swansea with a scar beneath her chin to a woman who redefined resilience in the public eye, Catherine Zeta-Jones's story is not one of perfection. It is one of persistence. She taught us that beauty is fleeting, fame is fragile, but strength endures. Her life whispers a lesson to us all, that survival itself can be a legacy, that even in silence there is power, and that the truest applause is not the one that fades when the lights go out, but the one that echoes in the lives we inspire. Catherine Zeta-Jones remains more than an icon. She is a survivor, a fighter, a light for all those still struggling to rise. And perhaps that is her greatest role of all,